Some leaders leave footprints, others leave libraries. You're tuning into the Authors on Mission podcast, where industry giants become literacy legends. In every episode, we talk with authors who turn their brilliance into books that transform lives. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, your host and Chief Creative Officer at Authors on Mission. Welcome to your authorship experience. Hello and welcome to Authors on Mission, the podcast committed to bringing you top-tier insights and strategies from established experts who have achieved remarkable success in their fields and wrote a book about it. I'm your host, Danielle Hutchinson, Chief Creative Officer here at Authors on Mission, and I am so excited to welcome an extraordinary guest, John Brink. John's life story reads like really an epic novel. Born in the Netherlands during World War II, he came to Canada with just $25 in his pocket, no knowledge of English, despite struggling with ADHD and dyslexia, which caused him to jump out of school. John went on to build the Brink Group of companies, pioneering sustainable forestry practices in North America. He is a man who froze completely during an independent presentation to become an accomplished public speaker, author of 5 books, the host of the popular podcast On the Brink, and it's nothing short of inspirational all in all. Today we're going to be discussing his latest book, Billion-Dollar Communication Skills, How to Build an Empire Through the Power of Words, where John shares how mastering communication can transform not just your career, but your entire life. So John, it is an absolute pleasure to have you on Authors on Mission podcast today. Welcome.
Pleasure to be here, Danielle, on your podcast.
Yeah, it's an honor to have you. I'm really excited to diving in and talking about all these amazing experiences that you've had throughout your whole life. I touched upon a bunch of those in the introduction there, but I think the main thing that I think we should start with today, of course, is your most recent book. This whole, journey you've taken has led you to writing this book now, The Billion-Dollar Communication Skills. What made you decide to start writing this book?
I've written, as I indicated, this is my 5th book. I've written a number of books about different things that made changes in my life. So, one of the most important parts has been all along coming from a challenging background is that what became obvious to me is that communication skills are critical in life and are also critical in terms of success. And what I do refer to in the book is my struggles along the way to become successful as a business person, but to build the business even further than I ever had thought it would go, would be the acquiring of being a good, effective communicator. And so another part of the book is where I introduce 6 or 7 billionaires that became very, very successful and who are known to most of us. And looked at their background and what made them successful and what brought them to how they get to being a billionaire and beyond. And in most cases, we will see that becoming an effective communicator was the critical part to all of their success. And I thought it was important for me having a unique background in the sense that, as you already said, I'm approaching 85 years old. I was born in 1940, northeastern Holland during the war years. But talking more about Holland in terms of what it is, it's a smaller country, obviously, very beautiful country. But Holland has 11 provinces. And the province I was born in is northeastern Holland, a province by the name of Groningen. And I grew up speaking dialect. And a lot of people in Holland refer to that as really not being a farmer, not speaking High Dutch. And so I loved speaking dialect, still do now actually. I love speaking dialect. But then I went into the Air Force when I was 18, and I had to learn to speak High Dutch. And so I was in the Air Force for from my time that I was 18 till the time I was 21. And then I decided to go to Canada when I was 24. And so now I had to start all over again in learning to speak English. I didn't know English. And so I went from dialect to High Dutch to English all in my younger years and then all the way through my early adulthood. So it became critical for me then to acquire the English language, but not so much speaking it, but also working in it and then understanding business and all the other things related to it, because I had ambitions. I was successful fairly early in my career. When I had no money, had the dream of building a lumber mill, as you already said, landed here in July of 1975. I had $25.47, but I had lots of attitude. I'm always positive, passion. Whatever I do, I give it 125%. And work ethic, I work harder than anybody. Even still now, at 85, I get up at 5:30 in the morning. I always make my bed, and I always think I'm late. And a lot of people said to me, John, you had such an amazing life. You should write a book about it. And now writing books, as you know, is not easy, and especially not for a person like me. And so I thought about it. I started, stopped. Then about 6-7 years ago, when I already was in my mid-70s, if I don't do it now, it will never happen. So the first book that I wrote is against all odds. And it's not about how successful John is, but it's all about the ups and downs along the way. And so, very successful book, actually, but it shares with others all the challenges that I had. And so it took me 80 years to live it, 20 years to think about it, 2 years to write it.
I love that breakdown that you just shared with us. I think it's important, one, that we know a lot about that backstory, because it does relate a lot to the content of your book and why you wrote it. What struck out to me the most is the idea of different dialects depending on where you were in life, and that you kind of had to adapt and learn those depending on the situation you were in. I think that's really interesting to think about, because it has to do with, writing as well. You always change your writing depending on the audience. But I wonder if you could share a little bit more about that. So, when you were growing up, you spoke one dialect, you changed it a little bit as you continued in life. What kind of modifications did you have to make? And was that challenging for you?
It was challenging in the sense that I had no choice. I was totally involved in anybody that were speaking English, and I was on my own. I like the Dutch communities, but I wanted to live within. I looked at myself always as a Canadian, because we were liberated by the Canadian Army, April the 12th, 1945, and it made such an impression on me as a 5-year-old that I knew from that point forward, as I grew up, I would go to the land of my heroes, Canada. And so that's how I felt about myself. And so I totally engulfed myself in the English language and learned to speak it and read papers and looked at television and gradually acquired the skill of speaking the language.
Understood. Yeah, so it takes a lot of hard work then, and being able to adapt and just having your mind open to adapting in that way. Personally, I've never had an experience exactly like yours, but I know what it's like to definitely change the way you speak to people depending on that situation. And I can see how that's a huge factor in your book as well. So transitioning into the content of the book itself, I was looking through it a bit. And, one thing that you do write about is the relationship between self-knowledge and effective communication, which ties hand to hand to what you were just talking about. So how can someone who struggles with self-awareness improve this part of their communication?
Yeah, so it is a challenge, but if you're engulfed in a situation where that's the language that is being spoken and you totally focus on that, then you have no choice other than you have to adopt And then if you want to then, which was important for me, although I started with nothing, I wanted to build a lumber mill in northern British Columbia. And so I had to start interacting with bankers and finances and understanding the businesses here in Canada, in particular in British Columbia. And so I read a lot, I looked at television a lot to become, at least have initially a casual knowledge of the language, but then the further I proceeded in business, the more important it became that you are able to articulate issues and clearly can define your answers to that, especially if you're dealing in business. And so it became a situation that I would not succeed unless I was able to be effective in terms of communications.
Right. And I like that last line you said, you can't succeed unless you are effective in communications. That kind of puts a dire spin on it, almost a sense of urgency, which is something that I'm sure you also have in your book. You don't improve communication for the fun of it, which you can, but more so to meet your goals and to connect with others and succeed, as you said.
And then obviously for me, there was always a question as to what made people in particular that we can relate to, like Stephen Jobs, the billionaires that we know, what made them so successful in which areas? Bill Gates is another example, obviously, that I refer to. What made them successful? Initially, having the foresight and the entrepreneurial skills, but it was at the end of the day, the question of communications was that they had to become effective communicators. And especially with Stephen Jobs on Apple, I still remember him making the introduction of the iPhone, in which he was very effective in saying, here is one, here is two, here is three, and here is four, and combining all of that into one phone, being the iPhone. That changed everything for Apple and still is today.
Yeah, and so this is one of the case studies that you do have in the book, I understand. And I notice and I appreciate that you're using this as a good way to, show how communication really does affect us all. And, being from such well-known people such as Steve Jobs, you can see how it has worked for others. And it makes your readers more likely to implement the practices that you have, and also offers a layer of credibility for you because they can see how these practices work in real life.
And then the other part, Danielle, that I believe is important, and that's why I kind of laid the foundation. I was born in northeastern Holland, in the province Groningen, where they speak dialect. People in High Holland, if they hear me speak, they can see the accent. They say, oh, it's a farmer. He probably comes from northern Holland. And so I already knew that. The same when I had to learn to speak High Dutch, there was always that sense of the dialect somebody could always notice. And then for me, academically, I was not a success story. I failed grade 3 and I failed grade 7 3 times. And then people said to my parents, who were beautiful people, what are you going to do with this guy? And some people say, send him to the mentally challenged school. He said, no, we're not going to do that. So I left school at grade 7. And then they said, well, let's send him to, my dad had a friend that had a furniture factory. So let's send him to the furniture factory and maybe he works with his hands and then he can become a furniture maker. And so said, okay. And so that's what I did. And so now, as you already know, that kids can be very hard on each other.
Mm-hmm.
So the friends that I had at grade 7 that went on to college and university became very, very successful, and they looked at me as a laborer. So, but I always knew that I was just as smart as the others, not smarter than, but just as smart as the others, and I could succeed. So I had the dream. I go to the land of my heroes, Canada. I'm going to build a mill, and to prove to me that I can do that, I'm going to start with nothing, or virtually nothing. 1 suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes. And when I landed here in northern British Columbia to build the lumber mill, I had $25.47. But I could not speak the language. And so it then became a question, and that's what I refer to in my book called The $1 billion Communication Skills, is that I make 2 statements with that $1 billion. Everything is possible. And so, as even in my case being an example, starting from that, and then academically not being a success story, start coming to Canada here, northern British Columbia and Prince George, starting from the beginning as a cleanup man, and very quickly thereafter, in a year and a half, I already was a part owner of a little sawmill, and then 10 years later, I started the company, the Brink group of companies that I have now. That's been here for 50 years actually this year, but we have about 10 different companies, and I've been, in the eyes of a lot of people, very, very successful. But I want beyond that, is that something else that changed my life. And that was after I was here. I was not a good communicator at that point. I was okay talking to some people in my company, 3 or 4 friends or workers in my company, but outside of that, I was not very good. I did not have the self-confidence until after I was here already for 32 years. In 1997, I went to a bookstore, and I always felt of myself, who am I? I never quite, why are things so challenging on me, including academically? So I went to a bookstore in January 1997, and I picked up a book, and actually we are now in the boardroom of one of my companies, but we have a studio where I do my podcasting. I have the actual book there that I picked up. And the book that I picked up, the title of the book is Driven to Distraction by Dr. Hollowell. Mm-hmm. And so as I was looking at the book was about ADHD and dyslexia. And I said, oh my God, that's me. And I wrote in the actual book, and I still have it in my studio, I would open it for you, and I would open the first page, and I wrote in Dutch, because there was a suggestion that ADHD may be a mental shortcoming of some sort or another. So now I finally know who I am. And so the more I found out about ADHD as I went through the book, and dyslexia, and I that's what is me. And I started looking at Google and checking it out, and I said, it's not only ADHD being looked at as something that is challenging, and in some cases being considered to be as a stigma, that I believe it's a superpower. And so that's how I feel about it today. So then when I discovered that and got to understand ADHD and dyslexia, it took me 5 years before I even went to my own personal doc that delivered our 2 daughters and was a personal friend. And he said, hey, John, why are you here? I said, I think I've got ADHD. And so we checked it out, and yes, I do. And so from that point forward, that changed my life. So then I was 62 years old. I then started thinking about a book, and that I referred to earlier. And so I believe it is a superpower. So the other part about it that I believe is important, Daniela, is that I left school at 12 and a half years old in northeastern Holland. It took me till I was 62 till I was diagnosed with ADHD. It was 50 years before I realized that ADHD was part of the reasons that I was academically not successful, obviously, and the traditional learning skills, as we know. So then what I also did then started writing the book Against All Odds, but I wrote another book as well, and I felt I had an obligation to do that, ADHD Unlocked. And this book, very, very popular again. And I started also to develop in my 50s already that I went to an organization called Toastmasters. I don't know if you're familiar with Toastmasters, but it's about communication skills. Very well known around the world, and particularly in North America. As we speak, there's probably 500,000 people in all kinds of communities going to Toastmaster clubs. And the objective is to acquire the skills, first and foremost, become a good listener. And the second one is to think on your feet. And the third one is to make presentations. That part changed my life. And so from there on in, I wrote more books, became a public speaker and demand speaker, started podcasting about 6 years ago. That has become a big part of my life. And still we have about 10 companies. And even now at 85, we're still growing our companies and expanding them further and further. And then I thought that with my history in particular, coming from an extremely difficult circumstance, speaking dialect during the Second World War, and then being involved in Holland, then barely have that under control, emigrating to Canada, and then into BC to learn to speak the language, started as a clean-up man, built a lumber mill, and then 10 other companies as we speak, and started to be an author. And then I felt the billion-dollar communication skills is the book that I have to write. And this one is about that journey. And then the other part is saying, what makes these people successful? And what did it take? And how different are they in a number of ways? And what we will feel and what we will see is that for them, the most rewarding period in most cases was not being a billionaire, but the way that they work towards step after step, falling down, stepping up again, and on and on and on, and developing, in particular, becoming an effective and good communicator. And that is why I wrote that book.
Right. And thank you so much for reiterating all that for us. You covered a lot of amazing topics, talking about your struggles with dyslexia and ADHD to, a little bit of the writing process there. So thank you so much for that. And I think everybody listening today has a very good idea of what the book's about and what they can expect from your journey, and also from the examples of the, very successful people that you include in the book as well. So I'm wondering, you've published books on many different topics so far, and I know that you also have 2 other books that you're working on. So I'm wondering if you'd like to share a little bit about those with our audience today as well.
So I showed you the first one, and that was
you mentioned that one for us, yes.
And ADHD. The other one that I wrote already is this one here. So I was watching on a U.S., and my own experience has shown that as well. I was watching on a U.S. television station, actually, where They talked about that 75% of the people that are working in the United States, I think Canada is the same, do not really like their jobs. And 70% of that 75% are looking for another job. And I believe Canada is the same. And so what I do a lot of times when I give presentations to young people in particular, then what I say to them is that in a lot of cases, respectfully, at universities, colleges, high schools, that after I give my presentation, I ask a number of them, so what are you guys going to do, guys, girls, whatever, what are you going to do when you're finished? And a lot of them say, I don't know. And I say, I believe, respectfully, that is important because most of your life you will be working in some particular direction that becomes very, very critical because virtually most of your time you will be in the workplace, and to enjoy, relatively speaking, what you do is important because if you don't, you'll likely take it home and people around you will know. So if you want to be example, if you want to be a truck driver, talk to truck drivers. What are they doing? Should they own the truck? Should they do this, that, and the other thing? Or if you want to be a contractor, build houses, talk to a contractor. They love to talk to you about what is involved, how do you do it, or if you want to be a lawyer, talk to lawyers in terms of what is involved, or an accountant, or an entrepreneur, for instance. And I have lots of young people talk to me about it and saying that the point is find your passion, and if you do, you will live the dream. And a fair question would be for me, since I started working when I was 12 and a half, so that is nearly 73 years ago. A fair question would be, hey, John, are you living the dream? I am. Every day of my life, I love to go to work. I love what I'm doing. And so I'm living the dream. And I felt I had to write a book about that. Now, the other book that I wrote is this one here. Because at 85, so this is a picture of me. I'm the oldest competitive bodybuilder in North America. And so this book is about quality of life, not about age. Age is just a number. But if you careful and take care of your body, your mind, your body, then it will give you better quality of life. In most cases, the average individual, the last decade of their lives are usually difficult and challenging. And so what I'm suggesting is that, and for me, any time is a good time. I started quite late, actually, before I took all of this serious. My wife is vegetarian. I didn't always listen as well as I could. So until I had a case of diverticulitis that nearly killed me, I came this close. And I knew that I had to be more careful about diet and exercise. So 16 years ago, I started going to the gym, got a trainer, and before that, I was just like everybody else. At the end of the year, say, I'm going to do this, that, and the other thing. I'm going to buy a membership to the gym. Then 2 weeks later, you can find 100 reasons as why we're too busy to go to the gym. And so, but I didn't. I did stay in the gym. I changed my diet, and I trained. And then after 6 years, somebody came to the gym and said, hey, John, have you ever thought about competing? I said, me? Yeah. And so I started working towards competing as a bodybuilder, and physique came in second bodybuilding, third in physique in Northern British Columbia. Then in the province of British Columbia, did the same. That qualified me for the nationals and the Arnolds. And then COVID came. And now again, at 86, I'm getting ready to go to the Arnolds when I'm 86. And so the point is, everything is possible. And diet, so what to me is important is get sleep. Sleep very important, 7 to 9 hours a night. And then be careful about your diet, get exercise, and then stay healthy mentally, physically, and that improves quality of life.
First off, very impressive that you shared all that with us, especially the bodybuilding book right there. I think that's something for everybody to achieve and look up to and really learn from. It's very inspiring. You certainly have been through a lot and accomplished a lot throughout the course of your life. So I'm wondering, where can people get in touch with you to find more information about you and these books and everything you do? How can they stay up to date?
The contact is John, JOHN, as in Adam or Aaron, Brink, BRINK.com.
Perfect. So we're going to put that in the description box of this podcast. And so guys, when you're, looking for more information about this, you want to stay up to date about upcoming releases and everything else regarding John and his amazing philosophies and experiences, go ahead and click that link. But, moving forward from that, John, I'm wondering, we've talked a lot about your life and all about your books. I'm wondering if you can share a little bit of insight about the writing process. Do you have any sorts of tips for the aspiring authors out there today?
Writing books is not easy. And so, as I've said, it took me a long time until I got the first one. But it's also part of a team effort. So it's not just writing the book. It's what does the book look like physically? Should there be a cover? What should be the title? Should there be pictures in the book? And what should be the font size? How about the pages and all those things? And then the editing of the book, very, very important. So as part of our team, we have people around us that do that, people checking through the book, reading the book, giving comments to the book, and making adjustments. And so I've done that with all 5 books that I've written and the other ones that will be next.
Perfect. Well, thank you for sharing that. I think that's, again, an amazing insight that we should all take with us and learn from and implement in our own writings, regardless of what the topic might be. And, I'm actually catching myself saying the word as I said that. John, I know that's one of the strategies that you do discuss in the $1 Billion Communication Skills book. Before we go today, I'm wondering, if you can share a little bit of insight about that. I was reading through it, and you do have some practical exercises and tips for someone improving their verbal delivery. How do you eliminate those filter words?
Yeah, so that is interesting that you say that, Danielle. So that's part of Toastmasters. So that, can you imagine, when I first went to Toastmasters, I said, okay, I'll go with you to Toastmasters, an ex-sister-in-law of my wife. So I said, is anybody going to ask me a question? She said, no, you just sit there and look. I said, okay. As long as nobody asks me a question. No, halfway through the meetings, somebody said, hey, John, tell us all about it. I said, oh, I'll never go back here. Well, I did. I stayed there for 10 years. So one part of, I believe, check it out for the people watching us. Go to Toastmasters, and it will show you where the clubs are and what they are doing. But it changed my life. So there is what they call an awe counter, ahs, and ahs. So, and one way of doing this would be, I have a cup in front of me here. So as I'm speaking and I say, it goes like this. Can you hear that?
Yeah.
So if you speak and I hear you say, try to speak and include ahs and ums. 1 or 2.
Right. I'm sorry. So to say an example.
So you did it already. So, and you heard me do this, right?
Yeah.
So what it does then now is it gives us an indication in a friendly way of reminding us to not use hums, haws, or repetitive words. Some people say, as I told you, as you know, as I can tell, and all those kind of things. So that's why we do this, talking about hums. And so the whole objective is, of Toastmasters, first and foremost, become a good listener. Right. And then speak on your feet. So we give you a topic, and we expect you to stand up and do 1.5 minute speaking about it. So say grocery store, and you stand up and now you talk about a grocery store. Yeah. And so you create a little speech. But I always say, what is a speech? Well, a speech is tell them what you're going to tell them. Then you tell them, and you tell them what you told them. That's a speech.
Okay, it's kind of restating a little bit.
Yes. And so first you give the introduction, and now you're a podcaster and you're successful. And podcasting, I find, very interesting. And I've done a lot of them. I've done about, not bragging about it, but just for our friends watching us, is that I think I'm at 410 where I'm podcasting and where I'm hosting, and then I'm guesting in something like 200, 250. But from somebody like you and me, I never quite know what will happen. And that makes it in particular interesting. So how can I interact and then find people that are watching us that like it and will express it, and subscribers, hopefully, on YouTube and other places?
Yeah, definitely. And, speaking of YouTube and subscribing, we're going to put the links into the description box of this chat, like I mentioned before. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more, everybody, you can definitely go ahead, click over, check out more resources, stay in touch with John. You had a really fascinating story, and you know a lot about many different topics. So regardless, everybody, if you are a writer, an entrepreneur, perhaps somebody just looking to improve your communication skills, John can benefit you in so many ways. John, thank you so much. This has been a really fascinating conversation today.
Thanks, Danielle. A pleasure for me to be part of your show.
Yeah, always. Again, we really do enjoy having authors on, especially ones who have, just learned a lot throughout their lives and are willing to share it with others. So everybody, John's new book, $1 Billion Communication Skills, does offer that roadmap for anyone looking to harness the power of words to create a life they truly want. It's available now, so go ahead, click on those links like I said, connect with John online, and remember, at Authors on Mission, we're committed to bringing you the strategies and insights that empower you to become an expert in their own right. We talk about more than success. We write about it too, crafting bestsellers and staying ahead of the curve. So thank you for joining us today. If you enjoyed the episode, check out John's links, and also check out more of our episodes here at Authors on Mission. And John, thanks again. Have an amazing night.
Thanks, Danielle. Appreciate it.
And to all of the listeners, keep writing, keep leading, and keep inspiring.
This is Danielle Hutchinson reminding you that somewhere, someone needs the book that only you can write. Visit authorsonmission.com to start your legacy. Until next time, keep leading, keep inspiring, and keep thinking in chapters. Have a great day.